This is 1 hour and 30 minutes of scary sleep paralysis stories. So let's start. Imagine this. So you wake up in the middle of the night, you're lying in bed, everything looks normal, you can see your room, but something feels wrong. You try to move your arm, nothing happens. You try to sit up, your body won't respond. You try to scream, no sound comes out, and then you see it, standing in the corner of your bedroom, a dark figure watching you. This happens to millions of people every single year. And what makes it worse is that the stories, the experiences, they're eerily similar across the world. Different cultures, different countries, people who've never met each other, all describing the same entities, the same sensations, the same absolute terror. Let me walk you through some of the most disturbing sleep paralysis experiences ever documented, and then we'll get into what's actually happening in your brain when this occurs. Because the science behind it might be just as unsettling as the stories themselves. First off, we need to talk about what sleep paralysis actually is before we dive into the nightmare fuel. When you sleep, your brain goes through different stages. One of these stages is called REM sleep, where most of your vivid dreams happen. During REM, your brain basically paralyzes your muscles. This is a good thing, normally. It keeps you from acting out your dreams, from sleepwalking into walls or punching your partner because you're dreaming about a fight. But sometimes something goes wrong. Your consciousness wakes up before your body does. You're aware, you're seeing your actual bedroom, you know you're awake, but your muscles are still in that paralyzed state. You literally cannot move. And here's where it gets worse. Because you're in this weird in-between state, half awake and half still in REM sleep, your brain is still generating dream imagery. Except now, those dream images are appearing in your actual bedroom, in the real world around you. They feel completely real. The medical term for this is a parasomnia. Episodes usually last anywhere from a few seconds to a few minutes, but when you're experiencing it, it feels like forever. Your breathing feels restricted. You might feel pressure on your chest. And up to 80% of people who experience sleep paralysis report hallucinations. These hallucinations fall into three main categories that researchers have identified. The first type is called intruder hallucinations. This is when you sense or see a menacing presence in your room, someone or something that shouldn't be there. The second type is incubus hallucinations, which involve that feeling of pressure on your chest, difficulty breathing, sometimes even sensations of being touched or attacked. The third type is vestibular motor hallucinations, where you feel like you're moving, floating, having an out-of-body experience, like you're watching yourself from above. Now let's get into the actual experiences people have reported, because once you hear these, you'll understand why this condition has terrified humans throughout all of recorded history. Here's one account from a college student during finals week. She woke up around 3 in the morning with this overwhelming feeling that something was wrong. She tried to move and realized she couldn't. Then she felt her bed literally swallowing her up, like the mattress was some kind of living thing pulling her down into it. She couldn't scream, couldn't move a single muscle. She said the faster her heart beat, the faster her breathing became, the quicker she felt like she was disappearing into the bed. She had to calm herself down, slow her breathing, and that's when she finally drifted out of the paralyzed state. But that was only the first time it happened to her. The second time, she woke up to see a very tall man standing by her door, holding something behind his back, moving toward her slowly. She was fully conscious, could see everything in her room clearly, but couldn't move or make a sound as this figure approached her bed. These weren't nightmares. She was awake. Her eyes were open. She was seeing this in her actual bedroom. Or take this experience someone shared online. They'd never had visual encounters before, but when it happened the first time, they were laying on their left side and started to feel that pressure on their chest. When they realized they were paralyzed and started panicking, something whispered in their ear, just coming in to say goodnight. That's when they felt like something was pushing them towards the edge of their bed. They described it as terrifying beyond words. Another person described seeing a cat-sized shadow creature at the base of their bed. It slowly crawled up onto the sheets and finally up to their chest. They watched this thing approach, completely unable to move, unable to stop it, just lying there paralyzed as this entity made its way up their body. Here's one that really gets under your skin. Someone described having a few different sleep paralysis demons and even what they called a sleep paralysis guardian angel. The demon ones were the usual shadowy figures standing over them or by the bedroom door. But the worst one happened while they were lying on their side with their back to the door. It felt like someone got into bed behind them, under the covers, and put their arm around their waist. Then it felt like they were cuddling into them, and they could feel breath on their neck. This went on for about half an hour. The whole time they're trying not to show that they're panicking because it feels like they're getting cuddled by a skeleton with claws. It was only about the second, maybe third time they'd had sleep paralysis, so they nearly had a heart attack when this thing feels like it's moving in closer to kiss them behind the ear. Then it whispered, "Not yet, you're not ready yet." Think about that for a second. Something is pulling you in bed, you can't move, you can feel its breath on your neck, and it whispers that you're not ready yet. Not ready for what? What was it planning to do? Let me share another one. Someone woke up around noon after their partner had gone into the bathroom to shower. They lay down on the couch, getting comfortable and a little lazy, waiting. Then they started to hear ringing in their ears. That's how sleep paralysis often starts for them, followed by a feeling of heaviness. They tried to yell for help but couldn't even open their mouth. They felt themselves sinking into the couch head first. While they were paralyzed, they saw a little girl appear in their apartment. She looked very human and normal, maybe 7 or 8 years old. She was playing on the floor, seemingly unaware of them at first. They tried to speak, to question who she was, but couldn't. They kept trying to break free, finally starting to regain movement in their fingers. The rest of their body slowly followed. The girl noticed this and got up from where she was playing. Then, moving on all fours, she casually walked up the wall and cradled herself in the curtain valance like a hammock. That's when this person noticed 2 very tall, dark figures standing behind the sheer curtains, right in front of the bathroom door. One was slightly taller than the other. They were just standing there, staring. At that exact moment, their partner opened the bathroom door, and they snapped out of the sleep paralysis. The little girl and the figures were gone, but they know what they saw. They know how real it felt. Here's an experience that shows just how vivid and detailed these hallucinations can be. Someone was taking a nap during the day, lying on their side, facing away from their door. They woke up to the sound of their door closing. They tried to turn around to see who had come into their room, but couldn't move. Their eyes were wide with terror. They could see everything in their room. They heard this thing walk around their room, then it sat on their bed, and they could feel the bed dip from its weight. It then shuffled toward them, and it felt like it began to spoon them. The entity was extremely tall. They were trying to move so hard, but were just lying still. The thing started breathing on their neck and tickling their back. It then stood up and left after a few minutes. They said this was the most terrifying thing that had ever happened to them. Here's one from someone who started experiencing sleep paralysis during their first year at university, during exam period, a very stressful time. Their worst experience happened after they'd been up all night doing an essay. When they finished, they immediately dozed off. The next thing they knew, they thought they had completely woken up, except there was a shadow demon looming over the end of their bed. It didn't have a face, but they could feel it staring at them, and it felt like pure evil. They tried with their whole body to scream, but nothing came out, which only made them panic more. They felt like the demon was about to attack them. Then its head twitched to the side and it pounced on their chest, sort of thrashing at them. They felt like it was suffocating them. They tried to close their eyes again and put all their energy into trying to wake up and move their body, the whole time with the demon hallucination still attacking them. When they were finally fully awake, they lay in bed for about half an hour, shaking and next to tears. They said it was probably the scariest thing they'd ever experienced. Another person described waking up lying flat on their back and seeing two people sitting on either side of them. They recognized them as two of their best friends, but their faces looked wrong, dark and shadowy. These figures just sat there, staring for a while. Then they started throwing giant spiders onto the paralyzed person, and the spiders ran all over their body. They tried with everything they had to move, to turn on a light, but couldn't move a single muscle. They could only lie there feeling hundreds of spiders crawling all over them. Here's one that demonstrates how the fear itself can be the worst part. This person's experience was different because they didn't see any entities. What scared them most was that the fear came first, so intense that it literally paralyzed them. In most sleep paralysis stories, people report that the inability to move comes before the fear. But for this person, they felt such overwhelming primal terror while falling asleep that their body actually locked up. They couldn't put into words how horrible it was to be so scared that they literally couldn't move. They were afraid to go to bed for weeks after that. Now when they start to feel that dread setting in as they fall asleep, they wiggle their fingers to confirm they can still move before letting themselves drift off. Someone else shared a really disturbing recurring experience. They described how they'd be lying in bed at night, everything quiet, and then they'd hear their bedroom door open. Except their bedroom door was already open. They'd hear footsteps, heavy ones, coming into their room. Then they'd see it, a tall shadow figure. It would walk into view and stop at the end of their bed, just looking down at them. Then the panic would set in. They'd start breathing faster, looking to their partner sleeping next to them, trying desperately to wake them up. Their eyes could move, but the rest of their body felt stiff and frozen. Then they'd hear a voice coming from the shadow man, deep, gravelly, like the demon from Hellraiser. It would say something like, "I am here." They'd feel the intense need to wake up their partner. They'd be calling for them, trying to scream, but they knew that in real life they weren't making a sound. They could only contort their hands and fingers in creepy-looking ways. Their breathing would get even heavier. Eventually, they'd just focus their gaze on the ceiling and wait for it to end. Here's where things get really strange. There's this phenomenon that keeps showing up in sleep paralysis reports from all over the world. People see shadow figures, dark, humanoid shapes. And one figure in particular appears so frequently that it's earned its own name in sleep paralysis lore. They call him the Hat Man. Thousands of people across different countries, different cultures, people who've never communicated with each other, have reported seeing the exact same entity. A tall shadow figure, somewhere between 6 and 10 feet tall, wearing what appears to be a wide-brimmed hat, often a fedora or top hat, sometimes wearing what looks like a trench coat. No visible facial features, just darkness. But everyone who sees him feels absolutely certain that he's watching them, staring at them while they lie there, paralyzed and helpless. The consistency of these descriptions is what makes the Hat Man phenomenon so strange. We're not talking about vague similarities. People describe the same height range, the same distinctive hat, the same outfit, the same behavior patterns, the same overwhelming feeling of dread and malevolence. Some describe him as having glowing red eyes peering out from the shadow, though others say his face is just complete darkness with no features at all. But that hat, that signature wide-brimmed hat, appears in account after account after account. One woman from Ontario described waking up unable to move and seeing him sitting in her room. He just sat very still, and the darkness wouldn't let her see his face, but she could tell he was wearing a hat. She was completely terrified. She tried to move, but couldn't even turn her head away from him. She said the thing that made it worse was how still he was. He wasn't actively doing anything threatening. He was just there, sitting, watching, and somehow that static presence was more terrifying than if he'd been moving around or making noise. Another person shared their recurring encounters. They woke up countless times in the night to see a man standing in their room. Either it was a bald guy or a guy wearing a fedora hat. They said it was the scariest thing imaginable. What got to them was the repetition. Once might be a nightmare. Twice might be coincidence. But dozens of times, always the same figure, always during paralysis, that starts to feel like something more than just random brain misfires. Someone else described their encounter in detail. They were lying in a room they'd recently moved into. They'd been feeling like they were being watched in this place, even during the day. One time they were sure they saw a shadow figure peeking into the window. Then it happened. They woke up in that paralyzed state. Their view of the room was the same as always. They heard a door open where there wasn't one. It was out of view, but then they heard someone walking into the room. Then they saw it, a tall shadow figure. It walked into view and stopped at the end of their bed and just looked down at them. The panic set in. They started breathing faster, looking to their partner sleeping next to them. Their eyes could move, but the rest of their body felt stiff and frozen. They heard a voice coming from the shadow man saying, "I am here." The voice sounded demonic, deep, and otherworldly. They felt the intense need to wake up their partner. They were calling for them, trying to scream, but they knew that in real life, they weren't making a sound. The Hat Man often just stands there, in doorways, in corners, by the bed. Sometimes he sits on the edge of the bed. Sometimes people report him sitting directly on their chest, causing that crushing sensation that's common with sleep paralysis. He rarely moves in dramatic ways. Sometimes he'll slowly approach the bed, each step deliberate and measured. Sometimes he'll lean over the person, getting closer and closer to their face. But Often he just stands at a distance, motionless, watching. And when people try to look directly at him, some report that he seems to shift, to evade direct observation, like he's always in their peripheral vision, even though they know exactly where he is. What makes the Hatman so disturbing isn't just his appearance, it's the feeling he brings with him. Every single person who reports seeing him describes this overwhelming sense of dread and malevolence. This isn't just, oh, there's someone in my room and I'm scared. It's deeper than that. It's a bone-deep certainty that this entity is evil, that it wants something from them, that it means them harm. Like this entity isn't just watching. Some people believe he feeds on fear itself, that he appears specifically to generate terror and then consumes that emotional energy. Here's an account that shows another common entity people encounter. Someone shared a story about their childhood bedroom. They had a closet that they'd lock every night before bed, except every single morning it'd be unlocked and slightly ajar. During the night, they'd wake up and have sleep paralysis. It was pretty frequent, and they got used to it. During the sleep paralysis, a figure would open up the closet and slip out. All black, sort of shadowy, and wearing what they described as a farmer's hat. It'd stare at them for a moment, just stare. Sometimes it'd take a step over before turning and walking out the entrance to their bedroom, which lacked a door but had beads set up. The beads would knock together. They can still hear that sound to this day. They had always been told they had an overactive imagination. They never spoke of it to their parents or family, since they thought they'd probably make fun of it. One summer, their cousin came to visit. She took over their room. She came down for breakfast in the morning white as a sheet and said they could have their room back. When their mother asked why, she told her she had sleep paralysis and saw basically the exact same thing. They had never spoken to her about it, never told her what they'd been seeing. Years later, once they'd moved out of the house, their mother told them something. Her bedroom was on the same hallway, and she always slept with the door open. She told them some nights she'd wake up just to see a figure pass by the bedroom quickly. 3 people in the same house seeing the same entity. How do you explain that? Now, you might be wondering, is this just people's imaginations running wild? Are they all just seeing the same thing because they've heard about it online or in folklore? That's part of the explanation, but here's the thing. Reports of the Hatman and similar shadow figures go back way further than the internet, way further than horror movies. We're talking centuries. The earliest clinical documentation of sleep paralysis comes from 1664, when a Dutch physician diagnosed a 50-year-old woman with what he called nightmare. But accounts of the experiences themselves go back even further. Ancient Greek physician Galen, way back in the 2nd century, was trying to figure out alternative explanations for sleep paralysis that didn't attribute it to supernatural causes. Even then, even in ancient Greece, people were reporting seeing shadowy figures and entities during these episodes. In Persian medical texts from the 10th century, you can find descriptions of sleep paralysis and the entities people encountered. Throughout medieval Europe, these experiences were universally attributed to demons, incubi, and succubi. An incubus was believed to be a male demon that would visit women in their sleep, sitting on their chest, sometimes attempting to assault them. The word nightmare itself comes from this belief, mare being an old term for an evil spirit that sits on people's chests while they sleep. In the Middle Ages, people experiencing sleep paralysis reported being attacked by demons and incubi, supernatural beings that would sit on their chests and suffocate them. There's even a famous painting from 1781 by Henri Fuseli called The Nightmare that depicts this. It shows a woman lying on her back, clearly unconscious or paralyzed, with a demonic creature sitting on her chest and a horse's head emerging from the darkness behind her. That painting was based on the widespread reports of sleep paralysis experiences during that era. It captured something that people across Europe were experiencing and trying to make sense of through the lens of their religious beliefs about demons and evil spirits. Different cultures have different names for sleep paralysis entities, and the form these entities take is shaped by cultural beliefs and fears. In Japan, they call the experience kanashibari, which literally means metal binding or bound by metal. They attribute it to visits from yokai, supernatural beings from Japanese folklore. One specific yokai associated with sleep paralysis is the makuragaeshi, which translates to pillow flipper, described as a childlike entity that flips your pillow or sits on you while you sleep. In Turkish culture, it's blamed on spirits called karabasan, which literally means dark presser. The name itself describes the sensation, something dark and heavy pressing down on you. In Bengali folklore, there's an entity called boba that strangles people when they sleep on their backs. The phenomenon is called bobai dora, meaning struck by boba. In Cambodia, people call it the ghost pushes you down and believe it's dangerous visits from deceased relatives trying to communicate or warn about something. In Italian regions like Marche and Abruzzo, they call it a pandafesce attack, referring to an evil witch or malevolent spirit that sits on people's chests at night. In Yoruba culture in southwest Nigeria, they call it Ogun Oru, attributed to traditional spiritual explanations. The Inuit have their own interpretations of sleep paralysis, seeing it through the lens of their spiritual beliefs about the soul and consciousness. Indigenous people in South Africa blamed it on Tokoloshe, a dwarf-like water spirit known for causing mischief and harm to people while they sleep. In Mexican culture, particularly around the folklore of the Southwest United States, there are accounts of La Mala Cosa, the bad thing, a shadowy entity that visits people in the night. The point is, humans across all cultures and throughout all of recorded history have experienced this, and they've all tried to explain it through their cultural lens, through the framework of their beliefs about the supernatural and the spiritual world. What's interesting is that modern reports are shaped by modern fears. People today report seeing aliens, horror movie monsters, and increasingly, shadow people like the Hat Man. Some researchers think the Hat Man might be influenced by modern horror culture, specifically characters like Freddy Krueger from A Nightmare on Elm Street, who wears a similar fedora and attacks people in their dreams. Freddy Krueger first appeared in 1984, and since then he's become one of the most recognizable horror icons. The visual similarities there: tall, dark figure, distinctive head, appearing in bedrooms, associated with sleep and nightmares. It makes sense that our brains might grab onto that imagery when generating a threatening presence during sleep paralysis. But here's the problem with that theory. References to similar shadowy figures with hats have been found dating back to the beginning of written records, long before Freddy Krueger existed, long before horror movies, long before photography or mass media that could spread these images. Shadow figures wearing hats appear in folklore, and historical accounts from cultures that had no contact with each other couldn't have shared these stories through any known means of communication. This suggests that either there's something about the shape of a hat, the silhouette, it creates that our brains find particularly threatening and tend to generate during these episodes, or that we're tapping into something deeper. Some researchers, particularly those influenced by Jungian psychology, believe the Hat Man might represent what Carl Jung called an archetype, a universal symbol existing in the collective unconscious of humanity. Jung believed that certain symbols and figures appear across cultures because they represent something deeply embedded in human psychology, fears and concepts that transcend individual experience. Let me share one more particularly intense account. Someone described a recurring entity that would visit them. They'd be lying in bed at night, and suddenly their bedroom would feel wrong, colder than it should be, the air thick and heavy. They'd try to sit up, and immediately an unseen force would grab them and slam them back down onto the bed. They were completely paralyzed. They couldn't even blink or feel themselves breathing. This entity, whatever it was, would hold their arms against the bed so hard they could hear their wrists cracking, could feel the pain radiating up their arms. It was pushing down on them with what felt like incredible strength. They said they weren't ready for what came next. They never were. The entity would lean in close, so close they could feel its presence inches from their face, even though they couldn't see it clearly. They felt burning eyes staring into theirs. They'd never been that horrified in their entire life. They didn't know if they were asleep or awake, didn't know what was real anymore. But it felt real, completely, utterly real. They could feel the entity's breath on their face, could smell it, this putrid, rotting smell. Then it would laugh, this horrible, inhuman laugh that seemed to come from deep in its chest. The entity would sit up on their stomach, the weight crushing them, making it hard to breathe. It would put its hands on their chest, and they could feel the cold spreading from those hands into their body. Then, slowly, deliberately, it would move its hands toward their neck, still laughing, harder now. They didn't know if they should fight or just give up, just let it happen. They were panicking, trying to scream, but the entity would put one hand over their mouth. They could taste their own tears running down their face, getting into their mouth through the small gaps between the entity's fingers. They didn't have the energy to fight. They were exhausted from lack of sleep, from too many nights of this. Part of them just wanted it to end, wanted the entity to finish whatever it was going to do so they could either wake up or die and be done with it. They described everything after that happening very fast. The entity doing something, though they couldn't articulate exactly what, and then suddenly they could move again. They'd sit up gasping, covered in sweat, heart pounding so hard they thought they might have a heart attack. They'd check their wrists, where they'd felt that crushing pressure, and they swore they could see bruises forming, though in the morning they were gone. They didn't sleep the rest of that night. They didn't sleep much for weeks after that. Here's another one that shows a different type of hallucination. Someone described having sleep paralysis, where instead of seeing entities, their entire room felt wrong. The dimensions were off. The walls were too close or too far away. The ceiling was at the wrong angle. Everything looked normal, but felt deeply wrong, like they'd woken up in a replica of their room that wasn't quite accurate. They had this sense that if they could just move, if they could just reach out and touch the wall, they'd confirm that none of it was solid, that it was all just a facade with nothing behind it. This went on for what felt like 10 minutes before they could finally move and confirm that yes, their room was normal, the walls were where they should be. Someone else shared an experience involving what they call their sleep paralysis demons, and even a sleep paralysis guardian angel. They had multiple recurring entities. The demon ones were the usual shadowy figures, but one stood out. They'd be lying on their side with their back to the door, and it would feel like someone got into bed behind them, under the covers, put their arm around their waist. Then it felt like they were cuddling into them, and they could feel breath on their neck. This would go on for about half an hour. The whole time they're trying not to show that they're panicking because it feels like they're getting cuddled by a skeleton with claws. It was only about the second, maybe third time they'd had sleep paralysis, so they nearly had a heart attack when this thing felt like it was moving in closer to kiss them behind the ear. Then, the worst part, it whispered, "Not yet. You're not ready yet." What does that mean? Not ready for what? Death? Possession? Something else entirely? They never found out because eventually the paralysis would break and the entity would be gone, but those words stuck with them. Not yet. You're not ready yet. Here's one involving a devil-like creature. Someone woke up, couldn't move, and saw this thing sitting on their chest. It was red and black with huge teeth. It felt like the creature was suffocating them, pressing down harder and harder, and they couldn't move or scream. What made it even worse was that after they finally broke free from the paralysis and sat up gasping, their husband woke up startled. He told them that something had been pressing on his chest too, trying to hurt him. Two people, same night, same bedroom, same experience of something sitting on their chests. Both felt it, both experienced it. How do you explain that with just neuroscience? Let me share one more that really captures how these experiences can become a recurring nightmare. Someone described a period in their life where they were under intense stress. They'd fall asleep and almost immediately enter sleep paralysis. It got to the point where they were afraid to close their eyes. They described one particularly bad episode. They were lying in bed and suddenly everything went wrong. They couldn't move, couldn't breathe properly, and then they felt it. Hands around their throat. Invisible hands, but they could feel the pressure, feel the fingers digging in. They tried to scream for their mom, thinking this was real, hoping she'd come into their room and save them. The grip on their throat got tighter and tighter. They were ready to give up. But as soon as they went limp, they jumped awake and immediately sat upright. Their hands went to their face and they could feel the wetness of tears. They tried to catch their breath, but it was difficult, still being in panic mode, wondering if what they'd just experienced was a nightmare or real life. This went on for 3 nights in a row. The bags under their eyes got more noticeable. They still didn't know if these experiences were real or just vivid imagination, and they were terrified of the answer. By night 3, it was almost 5 in the morning. They decided it was early enough to try and get some sleep. They were so exhausted, they passed out without realizing. Within minutes, the paralysis started again. They felt awake and aware of their surroundings. They saw him there, the entity, standing over their bed. They were looking at him, and he was staring right back, as if he could see right through them. It's late, or early, whatever you prefer to call this hour. They were lying there paralyzed, and this thing was just watching them, waiting for them to become vulnerable. It wanted control, always. Now let's talk about what's actually happening in your brain when this occurs, because understanding the neuroscience might help make sense of why so many people across different cultures report similar experiences. And honestly, the science behind it might be just as unsettling as the stories themselves. Sleep isn't just one state. Your brain cycles through different stages throughout the night. You have non-REM sleep, which is broken down into different stages of progressively deeper sleep. And then you have REM sleep, which stands for rapid eye movement. During REM sleep, your eyes move rapidly under your closed lids. Your brain activity increases to levels similar to when you're awake, and this is when your most vivid narrative dreams occur. You cycle through these stages multiple times during a normal night of sleep, spending more time in deep sleep early in the night and more time in REM sleep toward morning. During normal REM sleep, your brain releases two specific neurotransmitters: gamma aminobutyric acid, which is usually abbreviated as GABA, and glycine. These neurotransmitters essentially tell your motor neurons to shut down, creating what's called atonia, which is a temporary paralysis of your voluntary muscles. The only muscles that keep working normally are the ones that control your breathing, specifically your diaphragm and your eye muscles, which is why your eyes can still move rapidly during REM sleep. This paralysis is controlled by a specific part of your brainstem called the subcoruleus nucleus, also known as the sublaterodorsal nucleus. This mechanism evolved for a very good reason. Dreams can be vivid and intense. You might dream that you're running, fighting, flying. If your muscles were active during these dreams, you'd actually act them out physically. You'd be punching your partner in bed, kicking walls, rolling off the bed, potentially seriously hurting yourself or others. Rematonia keeps you safe by paralyzing you during your most active dream states. People who have a condition called REM sleep behavior disorder, where this paralysis doesn't work properly, do act out their dreams, and it can be extremely dangerous. Normally, this paralysis switches off as you exit REM sleep and begin to wake up. The neurotransmitters stop being released, your muscles regain function, and you wake up able to move normally. You're usually not even aware that you were ever paralyzed, because the transition happens seamlessly before you regain consciousness. But sometimes the process gets out of sync. Sometimes your conscious awareness, your ability to perceive your environment and think and form memories, comes back online while your body is still in that paralyzed REM state. You're aware, you're seeing your actual bedroom, you know you're awake, but your muscles are still completely locked down by those neurotransmitters. You literally cannot move. And here's where it gets worse. Because you're in this weird in-between state, half awake and half still in REM sleep, your brain is still generating dream imagery using the same mechanisms it uses during normal dreams. Except now, those dream images are appearing in your actual bedroom, overlaid on your real environment. What's happening is that different parts of your brain are in different states at the same time. Brain imaging studies using fMRI have shown that during sleep paralysis, the regions of your brain involved in alertness and sensory perception, specifically areas like the parietal cortex and the prefrontal cortex, are active and functioning at wake-like levels. You're conscious and aware, but other regions, particularly those involved in motor control and parts of your brainstem, remain in REM sleep mode. You have what neuroscientists call a hybrid state of consciousness, a dissociated state where waking consciousness and dream consciousness exist simultaneously. Because your mind is alert but your body is immobile, the sensations and hallucinations you experience feel external and completely real. They're not like regular dreams where things are vague or fuzzy or you're not quite sure what's happening. These hallucinations are sharp, clear, vivid, memorable. People can recall their sleep paralysis experiences with perfect clarity years or even decades later, remembering specific details like what the entity looked like, exactly where it stood in the room, what it said, how it smelled. That's because your waking mind is encoding these experiences as memories the same way it would encode real events. Now, here's where it gets interesting from a neuroscience perspective. Why do so many people see specifically threatening figures? Why is it almost always something scary and not like a cute puppy or a friendly person coming to say hello? There's a neurological explanation for this. Some researchers, particularly neuroscientist Balan Jalal, who studies sleep paralysis at Harvard, believe that the sensation of a menacing presence might be caused by a neural mix-up involving your body map. The right hemisphere of your brain, particularly a region called the right parietal cortex, is responsible for creating and maintaining your sense of where your body is in space, your physical self-image. This same region is also heavily involved in processing environmental threats and potentially dangerous situations. During sleep paralysis, this region might project your sense of self outward, creating a hallucination of a figure that you see outside yourself instead of recognizing it as your own projected consciousness. Essentially, your brain is trying to make sense of the paralysis, trying to explain why you can't move, and it generates an external threat as the explanation. You can't move because something is holding you down. You feel threatened because there's something threatening in the room. It's your brain creating a narrative to explain the sensations you're experiencing. The feeling of suffocation and chest pressure has a similar neurological basis. During normal REM sleep, your breathing pattern actually changes from your normal waking breathing. It becomes more irregular, more shallow, sometimes faster. There can be slight blockage or restriction of your airway, similar to what happens with mild sleep apnea. When you become conscious during this state, while your breathing is still in REM mode, your conscious brain tries to take a deep breath and finds it can't. Your breathing feels wrong, restricted, not fully under your control. This creates a sensation of resistance that your threat vigilance system, which is already on high alert because you can't move, interprets as something actively preventing you from breathing. Something sitting on your chest, something suffocating you. This triggers more panic, which makes you try harder to breathe deeply, which increases the sense of restriction, which increases the panic. It's a feedback loop. The fear of suffocation increases because you feel helpless, which causes you to struggle more, which increases the sense of being unable to breathe, which increases the terror. Research has shown that people experiencing sleep paralysis have measurable physiological stress responses. Your heart rate increases significantly. Your blood pressure goes up. You're releasing cortisol and adrenaline, your body's stress hormones, your sympathetic nervous system, responsible for the fight or flight response, is fully activated. But you can't fight and you can't flee. All that stress response energy has nowhere to go. You're trapped in your own paralyzed body with your stress response screaming at you to move, to run, to do something. Studies looking at the brainwaves of people during sleep paralysis have found something fascinating. You have waking level theta and alpha waves in some brain regions, indicating conscious awareness. But you also have the characteristic brain activity of REM sleep in other regions. Your brain is literally in two states at once. Some researchers describe it as local sleep and wakefulness, where parts of your brain are asleep while other parts are awake, creating this bizarre hybrid state. There's also evidence that your orexin system, which helps regulate the sleep-wake cycle and arousal, and your serotonin system, which is involved in mood regulation and sleep, are dysregulated during sleep paralysis. Cholinergic neurons, which use acetylcholine as a neurotransmitter and are heavily involved in REM sleep remain hyperactivated. Meanwhile, the serotonergic neurons that normally help you fully wake up and exit REM sleep are underactivated. So you have all the mechanisms keeping you in REM sleep still running at full power, while the mechanisms that should wake you up aren't working properly. This creates a situation where you're stuck in this in-between state. The cells capable of sending the signals that would allow for complete arousal from sleep, particularly those serotonergic neural populations, have difficulty overcoming the signals being sent by the cells that keep your brain in the sleep state. You're conscious, but you can't fully wake up. Interestingly, during normal REM sleep, the threshold for external stimuli to wake you up is actually very high. You're deeply asleep. But during sleep paralysis, studies have found that there's almost no blocking of external stimuli. You're abnormally sensitive to sounds, lights, sensations. It's much easier for something to register in your consciousness. This is why people experiencing sleep paralysis often report being hyper-aware of their environment, noticing sounds they normally wouldn't notice, feeling air currents, hearing distant sounds from outside or from other rooms. Certain brain structures seem to be particularly involved in the hallucinations. The vestibular nuclei, which are responsible for your sense of balance and spatial orientation, have been identified as closely related to the vestibular motor hallucinations people experience, those feelings of floating, spinning, or out-of-body sensations. When these nuclei are active during sleep paralysis, generating signals as if you're moving even though you're not, it can create those bizarre sensations of levitating above your bed or watching yourself from across the room. The visual hallucinations appear to involve areas of the brain normally associated with facial recognition and processing visual threats. There's a region in your temporal lobe called the fusiform face area that's specialized for recognizing faces. When this region is active during the hybrid consciousness of sleep paralysis, it might generate faces or humanoid figures even when none are present, similar to how you might see faces in random patterns or shadows under normal circumstances. Except during sleep paralysis, these perceived faces are vivid and seem completely real. Some researchers have proposed that hallucinations during sleep paralysis might involve similar neural mechanisms to those seen in other conditions that cause hallucinations, like Parkinson's disease and schizophrenia. There's evidence that increased activity of serotonin 2A receptors in certain brain regions might play a role in generating the visual hallucinations. These same receptors are the ones affected by hallucinogenic drugs, which is interesting because some of the visual effects people describe during sleep paralysis sound similar to descriptions of hallucinations from substances. That sense of things being hyperreal, more vivid than normal vision. Researchers have found that certain factors make sleep paralysis more likely to occur. Sleep deprivation is a big one. When you're really tired and finally crash, your brain might jump straight into REM sleep instead of going through the normal sleep stages first. This is called sleep onset REM, and it's when sleep paralysis most commonly happens. Irregular sleep schedules, like shift work or jet lag, can trigger it. Sleeping on your back makes you more vulnerable to experiencing it. High stress levels and anxiety increase the likelihood. Certain substances like caffeine, alcohol, and some medications, especially those for attention disorders, can trigger episodes. There's even a genetic component. Studies have found that if you have family members who experience sleep paralysis, you're more likely to experience it too. Researchers identified a specific gene polymorphism in the PER2 circadian rhythm gene that's associated with sleep paralysis. This suggests that disruptions in your natural circadian rhythm can make you more susceptible to these episodes. Sleep paralysis can occur on its own, which is called isolated sleep paralysis, or it can be associated with other sleep disorders, particularly narcolepsy. About 8% of the general population experiences sleep paralysis at some point. It's most common in people in their 20s and 30s, often first appearing during the teenage years. At least 20% of the population has experienced it at least once in their life. What's fascinating from a cultural perspective is that while the underlying neuroscience is universal, the way people interpret and experience these hallucinations is heavily influenced by their cultural background. In cultures where witch folklore is strong, people see witches during sleep paralysis. In cultures with strong beliefs about deceased ancestors, people see ghosts of relatives. In modern Western culture, where alien abduction stories are prevalent, people report seeing gray aliens. In recent years, as horror movies and creepypasta have spread online, more and more people report seeing shadow people, and specifically the Hat Man. This raises an interesting question. Are people seeing these specific figures because of cultural priming? Once you've heard about the Hat Man, if you experience sleep paralysis, is your brain more likely to generate that specific image? Or is there something deeper, some archetypal figure in human consciousness that appears across cultures and throughout history, only wearing different disguises depending on the era? Dr. Balan Jalal, a neuroscientist at Harvard who studies sleep paralysis, explains that brains use available cultural imagery to shape these hallucinations. Whatever frightens a particular culture tends to appear during sleep paralysis episodes. During the Victorian era, obsessed with death and mourning, people saw ghosts and skeletal figures. In modern times, we see aliens and horror movie monsters. But that doesn't fully explain why so many people independently report seeing nearly identical entities like the Hat Man, with remarkably consistent details about his appearance, behavior, and the feeling of dread he brings. Some researchers suggest he represents what psychologist Carl Jung would call an archetype, a universal symbol in the collective human unconscious that represents our deepest, darkest fears. The Hat Man phenomenon became more widely known in the early 2000s when a man named Timothy Brown started the Hat Man Project. Brown had his own terrifying encounter with the shadow figure when he was 14 years old back in 1994. The experience left such a deep imprint on his mind that decades later, he felt compelled to create a website where people could share their Hat Man experiences, and he could research the phenomenon. What started as documentation of what seemed like a very strange, uncommon hallucination has grown into thousands of reported sightings from all over the world, suggesting that the Hat Man is one of the most common specific entities people encounter during sleep paralysis. As awareness of the Hat Man has spread through the internet, through forums and social media and YouTube videos, more and more people report seeing him. This raises questions about cultural priming that are difficult to answer. Are people seeing the Hat Man because they've heard about him and their brains generate that specific imagery? Or were people always seeing him but didn't have a name for it until someone started collecting these stories and identifying the pattern? The fact that historical accounts of similar shadowy figures with hats exist from before modern media suggests the latter might be at least partially true. What's particularly fascinating is how the Hatman has evolved from a sleep paralysis phenomenon into a cultural entity in his own right. There's a 2015 documentary called The Nightmare that explores sleep paralysis through interviews with people who experience it, with actors recreating their experiences. The film prominently features accounts of the Hatman. There are songs, artworks, even horror stories written about him. He's become part of modern folklore, joining ranks with entities like Slender Man as a figure that exists in the collective consciousness of internet culture. Some people have tried to deliberately summon the Hatman, either during sleep paralysis or through other means. There have been disturbing reports of people taking high doses of diphenhydramine, the active ingredient in over-the-counter medications like Benadryl, specifically to trigger hallucinations and try to see shadow people, including the Hatman. This is extremely dangerous and can cause serious medical complications, including seizures, delirium, and cardiac problems. The fact that people are willing to risk their health to encounter this entity speaks to how the Hatman has captured people's imaginations, moving from a symptom of a sleep disorder to something people actively seek out. It's worth noting that while sleep paralysis is terrifying, it's not physically dangerous in itself. You will eventually wake up. Your breathing, while it feels restricted, is still functioning. The paralysis will end, usually within a few minutes at most. The main danger comes from the psychological impact. The intense fear and anxiety can lead to sleep deprivation because people become afraid to go to sleep. This sleep deprivation can then trigger more episodes of sleep paralysis, creating a vicious cycle. Some people report that their sleep paralysis experiences aren't always negative. About 20% of sleep paralysis episodes are actually described as pleasant or neutral. Some people report feeling like they're being protected by positive entities or energy. Some people who practice lucid dreaming have learned to recognize when they're in sleep paralysis and can sometimes navigate the experience without fear or even use it as a gateway into a lucid dream state. There are strategies that can help reduce the frequency of sleep paralysis episodes. Getting consistent, adequate sleep is the most important factor. Most people need at least 7 hours a night. Maintaining a regular sleep schedule, going to bed, and waking up at the same time every day helps regulate your circadian rhythm. Avoiding sleeping on your back can reduce episodes, since that position makes you more vulnerable. Managing stress through meditation, relaxation techniques, or therapy can help significantly. One study found that participants who used meditation and relaxation techniques cut the number of episodes they experienced by more than half, and the intensity of hallucinations decreased by more than a third. If you do find yourself in sleep paralysis, knowing what's happening can reduce the panic. Remind yourself that you're experiencing a temporary neurological glitch. You're not in danger. The entities you see aren't real. They're dream imagery leaking into your waking consciousness. Focus on trying to move just one small part of your body. A toe, a finger, even just trying to move your eyes in different directions. Some people find that trying to change their breathing pattern helps. The key is not to panic, because the fear makes it worse and makes it feel like it lasts longer. Different people develop different techniques for breaking out of sleep paralysis based on what works for their particular experience. Some people focus on their breathing, trying to take slow, deliberate breaths even though it feels difficult, using the breathing as an anchor point to calm themselves. Some people try to make sounds, any sound at all, even just a grunt or a hum, finding that if they can make their vocal cords work even slightly, it helps break the paralysis. Some people mentally count backward from 100, using the mental task to stay calm and give their brain something to focus on besides the fear. One particularly effective technique that many people report is trying to wiggle your toes or fingers. Since these are extremities, they sometimes retain slight motor control even when the rest of your body is paralyzed. If you can get your toe to move even a tiny bit, you can use that momentum to gradually work your way up, getting your foot to move, then your leg, until finally the full paralysis breaks. It takes conscious effort and can feel like you're trying to move through thick mud or against enormous resistance. But many people find this method works better than trying to move their whole body at once. Some people who experience frequent sleep paralysis learn to recognize the signs that an episode is starting and can sometimes abort it before it fully sets in. There's often a transitional period where you start to feel that heaviness setting in, or you hear that ringing in your ears, or you feel your body starting to feel strange. If you recognize these warning signs early enough, some people find they can force themselves awake by concentrating hard on moving or by mentally shouting at themselves to wake up. There's also something to be said for acceptance. Many people who deal with chronic sleep paralysis report that once they truly accepted that the hallucinations weren't real, once they stopped fighting the paralysis and just waited it out, the experiences became less terrifying. They still see the entities, still feel the paralysis. But instead of panicking, they think, okay, this is happening again. I know what this is. It will be over soon. This acceptance removes the feedback loop of fear, making the experience worse. Some researchers have been working on developing targeted treatments for recurrent sleep paralysis. Dr. Baland Jalal developed something called meditation relaxation therapy specifically for sleep paralysis. It involves a 4-step approach. First, you reappraise the meaning of the attack, reminding yourself that it's a common and temporary condition. Second, you practice psychological and emotional distancing, viewing the hallucinations as projections from your brain rather than external threats. Third, you focus inward on meditation rather than engaging with the hallucinations. Fourth, you use muscle relaxation to remain calm. In a pilot study with narcolepsy patients who experience frequent sleep paralysis, this approach showed promising results in reducing both the frequency and intensity of episodes. The relationship between sleep paralysis and certain mental health conditions is complex and bidirectional. People with anxiety disorders, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and bipolar disorder are more likely to experience sleep paralysis. But it also works the other way. People who experience frequent, disturbing sleep paralysis can develop anxiety specifically around sleep, which can evolve into insomnia or other sleep disorders. They become afraid to go to bed, afraid to fall asleep, because they don't want to experience another episode. This creates a vicious cycle where the sleep deprivation from avoiding sleep makes them more likely to experience sleep paralysis when they finally do sleep. Post-traumatic stress disorder and sleep paralysis seem to have a particularly strong connection. Studies with Cambodian refugees found that those with post-traumatic stress disorder diagnoses had significantly higher rates of sleep paralysis, and their episodes were more severe and more frequent. The hallucinations people with post-traumatic stress disorder experience during sleep paralysis are often related to their trauma, seeing figures that remind them of their traumatic experiences. This makes sense given what we know about how the brain generates these hallucinations using available cultural and personal imagery. If your mind is already primed to think about traumatic events, that's what will appear during sleep paralysis. There is growing recognition that sleep paralysis can cause significant distress and interference in people's lives. About 10% of people who experience sleep paralysis report that it causes clinically significant distress, and about 7% say it interferes with their daily functioning. For these people, it's not just a weird, occasional experience. It's something that affects their quality of life, their mental health, their relationships. They deserve proper recognition and treatment, but sleep paralysis is still often dismissed or not taken seriously by healthcare providers who don't understand the condition. One interesting finding is that not all sleep paralysis experiences are terrifying. About 20% of sleep paralysis episodes are reported as pleasant or at least neutral. Some people report feeling peaceful during episodes or feeling like they're being protected by positive entities. Some people who practice lucid dreaming deliberately try to enter sleep paralysis as a gateway to lucid dreams or out-of-body experiences. They've trained themselves to recognize the state and navigate it without fear, using it as a tool for exploration rather than experiencing it as an attack. This suggests that the fear response isn't inevitable. It's generated by how we interpret the experience, by our expectations and cultural conditioning about what sleep paralysis means. If you believe you're being attacked by a demon, you'll be terrified. If you believe you're having a neutral neurological experience, you might not be. If you believe you're entering a higher state of consciousness or having a spiritual experience, you might even find it positive. The underlying neuroscience is the same, but the subjective experience varies dramatically based on interpretation. Cultural attitudes towards sleep paralysis vary widely and significantly affect how people experience and cope with it. In some cultures, sleep paralysis is seen as a spiritual attack that requires ritual cleansing or protection. In others, it's seen as a sign of spiritual sensitivity or psychic ability. In modern Western medical culture, it's increasingly understood as a sleep disorder with a physiological basis. How a culture frames these experiences shapes not just how people interpret them, but how they cope with them and whether they seek help. There's some evidence that talking about sleep paralysis, sharing experiences with others who've had similar experiences, can help reduce the distress it causes. Online communities of people who experience sleep paralysis report finding comfort in knowing they're not alone, that others see the same entities, that what they're experiencing has a name and an explanation. This social validation can reduce the sense of isolation and the fear that they're going crazy. Let me share a few more accounts that really capture the range of experiences people have with sleep paralysis. Someone described an experience where they woke up during a nap and couldn't move. The first time it happened, they were a teenager watching a movie at home and fell asleep. When they opened their eyes, they could hear the movie playing faintly in the background. They tried to move to turn it off and could not. Then they had a very vivid feeling of someone standing by the bedroom door just watching them. They thought it was their mother checking on them, and they tried to talk to her or to move their head, and nothing. It was very scary. Finally, they managed to roll over, but so forcefully that they fell out of the bed. It has happened half a dozen times since then. They learned to focus on their breathing and slowly tried to move little by little until they fully wake up. Another person shared their experience with recurring sleep paralysis involving a little girl. They had very rare occurrences at first, all pretty random and unrelated. However, after they got engaged and bought a house, they kept having recurring sleep paralysis with the same little girl reoccurring. To their partner's horror, they'd usually wake their partner up telling them to make sure the crying or laughing little girl in the corner was staying with her back to them and facing the corner. They only really saw her when they were really stressed. The crazy thing about sleep paralysis for them was that it was either terrifying or they were still conscious enough in their own head to understand it was happening and just wait it out. Ironically, Once they and their partner started talking about the sleep paralysis, their partner also now gets it sometimes, but just auditory hallucinations. Here's another one that shows the physical intensity. Someone described lying in bed and suddenly waking to the feeling that someone was in the room with them, except they couldn't see anyone. Then they felt hands, cold hands, touching their face, running down their neck. They tried to scream, tried to move, but nothing. The hands kept touching them, exploring, like whatever it was trying to figure out what they were. This went on for what felt like an hour, but was probably only a minute or two. When they could finally move, they sat up and turned on every light in the house. They didn't sleep the rest of the night. Someone else described an experience involving auditory hallucinations that were particularly disturbing. They woke up paralyzed and heard footsteps coming up the stairs, heavy, deliberate footsteps, getting closer. They knew they were alone in the house. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs, came down the hallway, stopped right outside their bedroom door. Then, silence. Nothing, just silence, which was somehow worse than if something had come in. They lay there paralyzed, staring at their door, waiting for something to happen. After what felt like forever, they could finally move. They got up and checked. Of course, there was nothing there, but they swear they heard those footsteps. Here's one involving an old woman. Someone woke up and saw an old woman sitting in the chair in the corner of their room. She was just sitting there, completely still, staring at them. Not blinking, not moving, just staring. They couldn't move, couldn't look away. The woman's face was wrong somehow, too pale, eyes too big, mouth slightly open like she was about to say something but never did. This went on for several minutes before the woman suddenly stood up, walked toward the bed, leaned over them until her face was inches away, and whispered something they couldn't understand. Then they woke up, really woke up, and she was gone. Someone else shared an experience that involved multiple senses. They woke up paralyzed and immediately smelled something awful, like rotting meat, like something had died in their room. Then they felt their bed shaking, vibrating. They tried to look around, but could only move their eyes. In their peripheral vision, they saw shadows moving, multiple shadows, circling the bed. They could hear whispering, multiple voices all whispering at once, overlapping, incomprehensible. The smell got stronger. The shaking got more intense. They thought they were going to be sick. Then suddenly it all stopped and they could move again. Another account involves sleep paralysis happening during a particularly vulnerable time. Someone had just lost a family member and was sleeping in their childhood bedroom at their parents' house. They woke up in the middle of the night and saw their deceased relative standing at the foot of the bed. At first they thought maybe it was comforting, maybe it was their relative checking on them, but then the figure started changing. The face became distorted, the body became elongated, and they realized this wasn't their relative at all. It was something else wearing their relative's appearance. The thing smiled at them, this horrible wide smile that no human could make, and started moving toward them. They couldn't move, couldn't call out. The thing got closer and closer until they could finally break the paralysis and it vanished. Here's one that demonstrates how the paralysis can feel like it lasts forever. Someone described an episode that they swear went on for over an hour. They kept trying to wake up, kept feeling like they were about to break free, and then they'd realize they were still paralyzed. Over and over, they'd think, okay, I'm awake now. They'd try to sit up and nothing would happen. They were still frozen. This happened dozens of times. Each time they thought they'd escaped only to find they were still trapped. When they finally did wake up for real, they checked the clock and only 15 minutes had passed, but it had felt like hours. Someone else shared an experience with what they call their sleep paralysis guardian. Unlike most people who see threatening entities, they saw something they felt was protecting them. During episodes, they'd see a tall figure, but instead of feeling threatened, they felt safe. The figure would stand between them and the door, like it was keeping something else out. They said they know this sounds strange, but they actually looked forward to these episodes because they felt watched over, protected. Though they admitted that the first few times it happened, before they understood what it was, they were terrified. Here's one involving what appeared to be multiple entities. Someone woke up and saw 3 figures standing around their bed, 2 at the foot, 1 at the head, all tall, all shadowy, all completely still, just standing there watching. They couldn't tell if the figures were communicating with each other, but they felt like they were discussing something, deciding something. The person lying there paralyzed felt like they were the subject of this discussion. After a few minutes, the figures all turned and walked through the walls, literally through the walls, and disappeared. The paralysis lifted immediately after they left. Another person described an experience where the hallucination was so realistic, they had trouble believing it wasn't real even after they woke up. They saw someone they knew, a friend, standing in their room. The friend was talking to them, saying they needed help, something was wrong. The paralyzed person tried to respond, tried to get up to help, but couldn't move. Their friend kept talking, kept asking for help, getting more and more upset. The paralyzed person felt horrible that they couldn't help. When they finally could move and the friend disappeared, they immediately called their friend to make sure they were okay. Their friend was fine, had been asleep the whole time. But the person who'd had the episode said it felt so real, they were convinced something was wrong. Here's an account that shows how sleep paralysis can be triggered by stress. Someone was going through a divorce, not sleeping well, under enormous emotional strain. They started having sleep paralysis almost every night. Each time they'd see their ex-partner standing in the room, just watching them. Sometimes the figure would say things, cruel things, things their ex had actually said during arguments. Sometimes it would just stand there silently, a constant reminder of what they'd lost. The episodes didn't stop until the divorce was finalized and they moved to a new place. They haven't had one since. Another account involves a child experiencing sleep paralysis and not understanding what was happening. They were about 8 years old. They woke up and couldn't move and saw what they described as a monster under their bed, just a head peering out, staring at them. They tried to call for their parents, but couldn't make a sound. The monster slowly crawled out from under the bed, this horrible thing with too many limbs, and started climbing up the side of the bed. The child was absolutely terrified. When they could finally move, they ran to their parents' room. Their parents didn't believe them, thought it was just a nightmare, but the child knew they'd been awake. They knew what they saw. They were afraid to sleep in their own bed for months. Someone else described an experience involving time distortion. They woke up paralyzed, saw the usual shadow figure, the usual terrifying presence. But then they noticed their clock. The digital numbers were going backward. They watched as time reversed, the minutes counting down instead of up. They knew this couldn't be real, knew they had to be dreaming or hallucinating, but they could see it clear as day. The clock kept going backward, faster and faster, and the shadow figure kept getting closer and closer. When they finally broke free from the paralysis and looked at the clock again, it was normal, showing the correct time. But for those few minutes, they swear time was going backward. Here's one that involves sleep paralysis happening in a place that should have felt safe. Someone was staying at their grandparents' house in a room they'd slept in hundreds of times as a child. They woke up paralyzed and saw their grandmother standing in the doorway, but it wasn't right. The figure looked like their grandmother, but moved wrong, stood wrong. It started walking toward the bed, getting closer, and the person realized this wasn't their grandmother, it was something pretending to be her. The figure reached the bed, leaned down, and they could see that the face was all wrong, distorted, eyes too big, mouth stretched into an impossible smile. It reached out a hand toward their face, and that's when they could finally move. The figure vanished. They told their grandmother about it the next morning. Their grandmother said the same thing had happened to her in that room when she was young. Another person shared an account of sleep paralysis that happened during sleep paralysis. They woke up paralyzed, saw a figure, the usual terror. Then they woke up again, thinking they'd escaped. But they were still paralyzed, still seeing the figure. This happened 3 or 4 times. Each time they thought they'd broken free, they were still trapped. By the time they actually woke up for real, they were emotionally exhausted, didn't trust their own perception, weren't sure if they were really awake even then. Someone else described an episode where instead of seeing something, they felt something. They woke up paralyzed and felt weight pressing down on their entire body like they were being buried alive. The weight got heavier and heavier, pressing them into the mattress. They couldn't breathe properly. They felt like they were being crushed. They tried to scream, but nothing came out. Just this horrible pressure, getting worse and worse, until suddenly it lifted and they could move again. They said it felt like they'd been underwater, drowning, and finally broke the surface. Here's a final account that really captures how terrifying these experiences can be. Someone woke up and everything in their room was wrong. The shadows were too dark, the air was too heavy. They couldn't move. Then they heard breathing. Not their own breathing, someone else's breathing. Right next to their ear, they could feel breath on their neck, hot, wet breath. Something was right behind them, breathing on them, and they couldn't see what it was, couldn't turn their head. The breathing got louder, heavier, like whatever it was excited, aroused. They felt something touch their hair, running fingers through it. Then the breathing stopped. Complete silence, which was somehow worse. They lay there in complete silence, feeling a presence right behind them, waiting for something to happen. After what felt like an eternity, they could finally move. They turned around. Nothing was there. But they swear they felt it. They swear something was there with them. The next time you wake up in the middle of the night and can't move, remember these stories. Remember that you're not alone in this experience. Remember that it will end. And maybe, just maybe, don't look toward the corner of your room, because if there's a tall figure wearing a hat standing there watching you in the darkness, well, now you know what it is. Now you know you're not the only one who's seen him. And somehow, that knowledge doesn't make it any less terrifying. Sweet dreams.